Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 304 of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. The title of today's interview is Numb, an interview with Grace Anderson. My name is Matt Sabatello.
And I'm Carly Taylor.
I had the honor and privilege of bringing back one of our first podcast guests, Carly Taylor, to be my special guest co-host on this podcast. Carly taught me so much when we interviewed her almost 2.5 years ago. And again today, she brought so much to this interview and taught me so much about how to recover and heal from Lyme disease.
Hey, Tick Bootcamp family. I'm so excited to be back here and co-hosting. Grace is such a powerful person. I was honored to be able to interview her. She was a kid when she was sick, as you'll hear, and she has gone through a roller coaster of a journey from all different diagnoses and just different healing modalities. It's a wild ride, and you can really see her strength and how passionate she is about just digging to find the answer, and is really trying to share her story so she can help others. It's a really, really powerful episode.
So without further ado, we introduce Grace Anders in Numb.
Welcome to the Tick Bootcamp, Grace. So excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so excited to hear about your story and where you are now. So let's kick it off with a little bit about your background so we can, find out who you are. Where do you live? What do you do? And whereabouts did you grow up? If you want to give us that background.
So I currently live and grew up on the coast of Maine.
Cool.
And currently I'm not doing anything but going to school. Yeah, sorry, instantly Lyme brain.
Yeah, no, totally normal. And how old are you?
I'm 21.
Awesome, cool. What are you studying in school?
Mental health and human services. It was one of the only things that really grabbed my attention, and I could do the entire thing online, which is really helpful with me and my health currently.
Oh, that's amazing. Has that always been an interest of yours?
Yeah, I've always loved psychology. That, music, and English have always been the things that have really grabbed me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. So kind of on that subject, what are some things that you are really into, some dreams, goals, or things that you pursued prior to getting sick?
Yeah, well, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a musician so badly. I wanted to be Taylor Swift. That was my goal in life. But now I've always loved songwriting, but I realized that what I like more is like short stories and things like that. And I'd really love to write both a novel and an autobiography one day.
Oh, that's amazing. And for music, do you play any instruments or singing, or just love listening to it?
Well, I do sing, but I'm not good at it.
That's okay. I'm sure you're great.
Just simply because I enjoy it. And I tried playing guitar, but my hands were too small for it. So I ended up playing ukulele.
Oh my God, that's so awesome. That is really cool. I've had the same issue as well with my fingers not really working on the guitar. So I should probably try the ukulele. That's amazing. So you're with music, are you doing any of that still now, kind of like in at school, or is that just kind of more focused on like mental health right now?
Yeah, well, I don't take lessons for that anymore. I stopped doing ukulele lessons a while ago. And I go through periods where I don't play, but then suddenly I'll get the urge to, and I'll pick it up and start playing again.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we can get into that more in a bit. So you said you live in Maine. You said on the coast, is that correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. Are you like right near water, or are there like woodlands around, or what does that look like?
Yeah, the town where my parents are divorced, so I grew up in two separate towns, but the town where I went to school, you can see the ocean from just about anywhere in town.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. That's awesome. Really, really cool place to live. I'm also from New England, so that area is just Amazing. And you currently live there now?
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So kind of, how going to when you first saw symptoms or felt symptoms, when was that? How old were you when you first got sick, or the year, how many years ago?
Yeah. So I'm honestly not sure if I had any symptoms prior to this, but the first time I kind of say this is really the event that started it all. I was 12 and it was the summer of 2013. I was at a Taylor Swift concert, and I remember I was walking towards the stadium with my dad, and I looked at my feet and they looked like they were like miles away. It looked like in Alice in Wonderland when she looks at her feet when she's growing taller. That's kind of what it looked like to me. And then all of a sudden I got this wave of dizziness and some nausea, and I soaked my clothes in sweat. And first thought was dehydration. So it took a while, but we got through the gates of the stadium and I got some water. But I just got sicker, and I ended up in the first aid station. And I spent about 2 hours there, I would say. And then Ed Sheeran was opening for her. And when he was playing, I said to my dad, because I was throwing up, I was so dizzy that it was painful, and still completely soaked in sweat. And I said to my dad, like, I think I just want to go home. And we started leaving, and he helped me get up to get to the car. And as soon as we walked out of the first aid station into the stadium, I was totally fine. It was like it never even happened. I felt perfect. Like I was a little cold because my temperature had dropped so much, but besides that, it was fine. And I ended up staying through the whole show. And then a month later, almost exactly a month later, it happened while I was at my best friend's house. And then a month after that, it happened while I was at school. And after that is when it was really apparent that something was wrong. And I started having daily symptoms, fatigue, fevers, some lightheadedness, headaches, stuff like that. And they did a bunch of blood tests. They found out I had Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I think my antibody number was supposed to be 9 and it was 900. So obviously something wasn't right there. And when I heard that, it was like, so all I have to do is take a pill and I'll be fine, like, because that's how you treat Hashimoto's. It's just 1 pill a day. But I continued to get sick, and then I continued showing daily symptoms, and it eventually got to a point where I could barely function. I wasn't in school anymore. They had me in tutoring twice a week, and I just continued to get sicker from there. And nobody really knew what was going on. I was diagnosed with migraines, but I went to an endocrinologist when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and my mom said to him, like, this doesn't explain everything. Like, what about all these other symptoms she has that are not symptoms of this? And he said, oh, well, that's just anxiety. And he put that on my chart with no proof of it. So
wow. The doctor did that? The doctor put it on the chart?
Yeah. And that's what people started paying attention to when I went to new doctors. So it took a really long time for someone to take me seriously.
Wow. And when you said you weren't in school anymore, was that in like what age or grade was that? Like,
that was 7th grade.
Wow. You were really young.
Yeah.
And really not feeling well. I'm sure when all of your other friends were feeling great, having tons of energy.
Yeah. Everyone I knew was doing perfectly fine, especially because a few times I got sick when I was with my friends. And like the time I got sick at my best friend's house, we were previously like jumping around to the new One Direction single and everything was fine. And then suddenly I just crashed. Like I felt like the whole world was spinning, or really I was spinning. And I just got sick after that.
So Grace, hearing this and being told it was all anxiety, and unfortunately, when I heard you describing your symptoms at the concert, right away I thought, I've heard the story 1,000 times. It's so frustrating, but they're going to say it's anxiety because they're going to run the test. Nothing's going to come back. It's not going to fit anything perfectly. And of course, your endocrinologist said, hey, you have Hashimoto's, but all those symptoms that don't fit, that's just anxiety. But Hashimoto's is what's causing some of your symptoms, right? Did your family believe this? Did you believe this? And how did this impact, your view of your illness at this point, right? Because when I was told it was all in my head, I couldn't help but let myself think that maybe I'm a little crazy. Maybe I do need to go spend some time away. Maybe I do need some mental health medication because I just wanted to feel better, right? So how did you respond to that? What was your response to that statement?
Well, later on, I did start to question whether like I had some anxiety. But at the time I was so sure that something was wrong and they weren't finding it. Like I knew that if it wasn't all the things they tested me for, then it was something else, like something is wrong with me. And of course they didn't know me. They thought I was just like a kid who wanted to get out of school. But that was not the case at all. Like maybe I would have faked like a stomach ache to get out of a day of classes, but I would have never done this. And something was definitely wrong. And my parents believed me 100%. They never had any doubt that I knew what I was talking about.
What about your friends? Did your friends believe you were as sick as you were, or were they thinking that maybe it was just, again, anxiety, depression, and more psychological issues than physical issues?
Yeah, I had some friends who I was never an active person. I was never like into sports or anything. So I definitely had people think it was just because I wasn't active enough. But I don't know if anyone thought like mental health issues. But I had a lot of friends also who believed me and who knew something was wrong and who saw it firsthand. And I think the people that thought like, well, maybe you just don't move enough and stuff like that. I think that opinion changed after I got sick at school because I was with all my friends when it happened. So
let's talk about this "you don't move enough" statement, because for me, it's crazy even hearing that, right? How is you not moving or you not being active enough going to cause you to have these crazy real physical symptoms, right? So like, why do you think these people were making these wild assumptions about you and sort of writing off your sickness because you weren't active enough, right? Like, where do you think that came from?
I'm honestly not sure, but we were pretty young at the time, so I think it was just like, well, that was the first thing that like popped into their heads. The first thing they knew about me was that I didn't like sports and stuff like that. So I think they just kind of went with that, if that makes sense. I honestly don't really know where it came from.
It does, and I just want to ask a question about the mental health piece here as well, and then Carly's going to continue on. But I find this topic so fascinating because we talked offline before we started this podcast that before I got sick, I was a little impatient with people that had anxiety and depression and psychological conditions. But now going through this experience, I can appreciate it much more having had those symptoms myself. And many people are afraid to speak up and say, hey, look, I've had anxiety, I've had depression. In general, those things should not be stigmatized where we're afraid to vocalize them. But beyond that, we just interviewed last week Dr. Alan McDonald, who's this brilliant pathologist who does, in addition to looking at blood under the microscope, he actually does biopsies of organs and brains. And he's found a direct connection between bacteria in our brains, parasites, Lyme bacteria, and different strains of Lyme bacteria. Borrelia miyamotoi can cause different symptoms psychologically than Borrelia burgdorferi. So we're starting to barely scratch the surface to understand what these pathogens, what these tick-borne illnesses, and even what different species of Lyme itself can do to the human brain to cause anxiety, right? So I just want to make sure people listening know that it's okay if you're anxious, it's okay if you're depressed, and that we need to verbalize these things and not worry that we're going to be labeled as crazy, because these are symptoms that come along with having Lyme disease, right? So Carly, on that topic, if you can help me transition here, but like, I know it's something that I struggle with. Is that something that you had to deal with as well? And I'm curious how it affects females differently than males, because my experience, being in my 20s when I got sick is far different than, your experience, Grace, when you were 12, and your experience, Carly, when you first got sick as well, right?
Yeah, and that's why I was so shocked that you were so young and had to deal with that. I was in my 20s, late 20s as well. And I feel like with being sick and not knowing what's going on gives you even more anxiety on top of the already having the symptoms of that anxiety of physically things that are going on. For me, I think that anxiety ran in my family for so long, and it was a lot more understood and I guess accepted in a way, and just gaining tools was always something that I was really focused on. So I was pretty prepared as I was experiencing even more with being sick. However, I don't think you're ever prepared for the feelings that you're having. And I would always think, I remember feeling like people weren't going to believe me. No one ever said that, but it's always, I feel like, an automatic thought or feeling that, oh, if I can't go out, people are going to be like, oh, sure. Yeah, she's just making that up, or she's being dramatic, or whatever that may be. I was lucky that I never got anyone saying directly they didn't, but I always felt that way. And I think that's probably something a lot of Lyme patients go through. And I mean, your story, that is so powerful that you were so young. It's such an impressionable time too for you to be going through that and having people actually not believing you. Plus, on top of it, I'm sure you were having that feeling, being like, wait, what's happening? Like what is going on? And you were also dealing with Hashimoto's at this time, or what they told you was Hashimoto's. So as a young girl, that's a lot to take on. How did this get in the way of you being a kid? Kind of explain of essentially being a kid and any of like those dreams and goals and things that you love to do then. How did that, how you were feeling, interfere?
It didn't interfere a lot at the beginning, because it was it started as these episodes that would come like once a month, and then that was it. The rest of the time I felt fine, but then I started getting daily symptoms. And I mean, I obviously, like I said, I had to stop going to school, and that affected me quite a bit, because I was no longer with my friends every day. And at first I really enjoyed it, because I always thought it would be so cool to be like homeschooled, and that's basically what I was doing. I did see a tutor twice a week, but I did most of my work at home, and I really enjoyed that. But I mean, both my parents worked, my brother went to school, and so I was alone a lot. Like sometimes I went to my grandparents, or I saw other people, but for the most part I was not really around people, let alone people my own age. So I started feeling pretty lonely because of that. And as far as like things I enjoy doing, it got to a point where I couldn't really like since we lived right in town, in this small town, we used to walk downtown after school. I couldn't do that anymore. I remember one time I tried to, but we were stopping at my house beforehand, and by the time we got there, I felt too sick to do anything. Dizzy, nauseous, just worn out. So in those ways, things changed. But as far as like music goes, that didn't really change that much at first. But over time it did, because I was just having such a hard time like with instruments, like moving my hands, but also like because I wanted to be Taylor Swift so badly. So I used to like dance around in my bedroom, and a lot of people like will sing into a hairbrush. My dad's a musician, so he got me like an actual microphone. And one time I was doing that. This was years ago. and I suddenly felt just so dizzy and off balance. And like I couldn't feel my legs all of a sudden. And I didn't have very much control over them. So that was kind of like a shocker to me, that I could no longer do things that I loved. Like it was one thing to stop going to school and stuff like that, but to not be able to do something that I've done basically my whole life that I absolutely loved, that was really hard for me.
Yeah. And that is, say, one of the hardest parts, is having your life change so much. And just why so many people just don't stop till they find an answer. So we left off with that doctor putting anxiety on your record, and them just, first saying Hashimoto's, just giving you a pill, and then having it go to another doctor saying it's anxiety. And you all know that it could be more. So take us through where you went from there.
Yeah. So my mom went to my primary care doctor, who said like anxiety, like didn't want to even see me again. And after I had collapsed at school, I was actually taken straight to the doctor because they wanted to see it when it was happening. So that's exactly what my mom did. She took me to the doctor's office, and they saw it and saw how scary it looked, and how like just really sick I was. And still, even after that, the doctor said, oh, it's just anxiety. Like people have seizures from anxiety. Like anxiety can cause anything. So that's probably it. And or he was actually pretty sure that was it. But then my mom went to him and said that she wanted me to see a neurologist. And there was a neurologist at our local hospital that had a good reputation, and she insisted that I get into him. So they got me into him, and he didn't know what was wrong, but he could admit that he didn't know what was wrong. And that alone was really big for me. He could say like, I don't know what this is. I can refer you here and maybe they'll know. Because he wanted to get me into Boston Children's Hospital. I think at the time I was like 14. And my primary care doctor, that office had refused to refer me. And I can't remember exactly what was said, but I remember like sitting down with the doctor and knowing exactly where it was going. And it went something along the lines of like, it's been a while and nothing has changed for you. So maybe it's not real. Like maybe you just have anxiety. And she then said she wouldn't refer me to Boston because Boston was a dead end. But my neurologist referred me to neurology at Boston Children's, and they got me in pretty quickly. And they didn't find what was like the source of it all, but they discovered that I was having seizures, which no one had been able to tell me beforehand.
Wow. So how did they discover that? Did they do some kind of scan?
I honestly can't remember. I just remember her saying like, I think you're having seizures. And I don't know if she said that based on my symptoms or what, but after that, I went and got an EEG, and they kept me awake all night and then had me fall asleep, and they put the thing on my head, and there was seizure activity. So she was right.
Wow. And how old are you at this time?
I was 14, I think a few months away from being 15.
Wow. That is so young. And so where was the diagnosis? What doctor had figured this out? Was there many more in this journey, or were you close together?
Well, something that I feel like I should have mentioned earlier is when I was getting told at the very beginning, like this isn't real. Like you're imagining this, you're faking it. It's just anxiety, you're mentally ill, all that. I remember sitting down at the table with my dad and my brother. And my brother asked, like, what do you think it is? He asked me, and I said, I think I have Lyme disease. Like, I just felt like that was what was wrong. I don't really know how to explain it. I just had this like feeling in my chest, like it felt right. And it was one thing they tested me for, but it was negative. And then he asked my dad, like, what do you think it is? And my dad said, I think she has Lyme. So after getting diagnosed with seizures, I feel like there was this period where I didn't see as many doctors. Like they were focused on the seizures, but they didn't want to treat them because they thought seizure medication would make it worse, especially because they had diagnosed me with the type of seizures that people usually outgrow by the time they're 18. So they didn't want to really mess with that. But my mom knew a naturopath who is also like Lyme literate, and she's very smart and has a lot of information on Lyme. And so she tested me. And at this point I was like 2-3 months away from being 16. And she tested me and with a Western blot test, and it was positive. And so that was kind of when I reached that diagnosis.
How are you aware that Lyme could have these types of symptoms? Because I didn't know that it could be like this until I had a cousin who had like debilitating Lyme, couldn't walk, was a marathon runner, was bedridden after that. And I had no idea. How did you know? Did you know somebody who had it or hear about it?
Well, at first, when I was so sure I had it, I didn't know anyone that had dealt with it. I grew up in Maine, and like I was always told, especially by my grandpa, like every time you come back inside, check for ticks. You don't want to get Lyme disease. Like, and I always like almost prided myself on the fact that I had never found a tick on me, because bugs like are just attracted to me for some reason. Mosquitoes, fleas, if there's one in like this huge house, it's gonna find me. But I had never had a tick on me. And when my grandpa, grandma, brother, when they all came in from outside, they were covered in them, and I never was. And then so like I grew up being told about that, and every doctor's office has signs like Lyme awareness and what to look for and stuff like that, which is why when this happened and I thought I had Lyme and I had mentioned it to my primary care doctor, I was so surprised that it wasn't taken seriously, because when you don't have it, they make it seem like this huge thing. And then when you might have it, they like kind of push you to the side. That's what my experience had been, at least.
That's fascinating. It's probably because they don't really know what to do if you have a diagnosis. All these doctors, they just know that they're told to be aware of it. So that sounds like you actually never saw the tick bite that would have made you sick. I had it. So.
Actually, I remember the tick biting me, which is very unusual, I guess. It's very uncommon, but it was May 2013. And I'm surprised I remember this, because that day I had gotten I don't know if I got a tooth pulled or I got something done on my mouth, and they had to put me under for it. And when I came home, I was laying on the couch watching a movie with my brother, and my dad was cooking dinner, and my head started to itch. And I don't really remember what happened, but I remember like lifting my hand, scratching my head, and feeling this little bump. And then next thing I knew, I was holding this bug, and I said, like, what is this? And my brother leaned over and he said, I think that's a tick. And my dad came and took it, and it seemed like, okay, well, that's the end of it. Like, I didn't expect to get sick from it. I was surprised I had a tick on me, because like I said, I never really did. but it just seemed like that was over and I didn't expect anything to come of it. I didn't expect to get sick.
Grace, what drives me crazy about this story is you and your family were Lyme aware. You live in a Lyme endemic area. You had a tick bite you. You and your dad thought you had Lyme disease. You got a Lyme test, which was negative. Your symptoms progressed, but they said, oh, it must just be anxiety besides Hashimoto's. And everybody knows Lyme tests are horrible, right? Again, another thing we just learned last weekend is there's a term called sequestering, where the Lyme bacteria actually will use your immune system's response to coat the spirochete and protect itself, right? And when it does that, your body eventually stops creating antibodies, and therefore you won't test positive. So there's this whole concept now that's being developed within the last year, but it's been known in Europe for even longer, that the Lyme bacteria is so smart that it's going to result in far more false negatives than we ever thought before for Lyme disease. So this is something that I think we need to catch up with. But despite all that groundbreaking discovery, how do you think it got lost in the cracks between all that, you being Lyme aware, you living in a Lyme endemic area, you got bit by a tick? Like, why were your doctors so like breaking their neck to not look at Lyme disease, do you think?
I'm honestly not sure. The tick bite was something that I had forgotten when I first got sick, and I remember remembering it some time later, but it still didn't seem to change anything. The fact that I remember that, and yeah, I'm really not sure why people were so insistent on not like digging deeper into it. I had my primary care eventually like said, actually, I don't know if this was the first time I brought up Lyme or if it took a while. I'm not sure about that, but at some point, she prescribed me antibiotics, and she had me on antibiotics for 2 weeks.
Was it Doxy? Do you recall what type of antibiotic?
I don't remember. I feel like Doxy would be the go-to.
When you were young, maybe amoxicillin, possibly.
Possibly, yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I ever knew. I just took it because they told me to. But I took that for like 2 weeks, and then it was like, okay, well, you're not cured, so it's not Lyme. And then
did you feel any better at all? Did you feel anything from the antibiotics?
I don't remember exactly, but I remember at the end I was still pretty sick. So I don't know if it really made a difference at all, but I definitely, something was still wrong by the end of it. Most of my symptoms were still there.
So I think this is just another example of a misconception, right? This is a Lyme fallacy, where if you have Lyme and I give you 2 weeks of antibiotics, you should feel better. And if not, it can't be Lyme disease. I just had on Wednesday this week, a colleague come into my office in a panic saying, I just found this tick biting me while I was using the restroom, had it in a baggie. It was on her for 3 days and had a complete panic attack. And just today, now there's a bullseye rash. And you know what her doctors are telling her? Take 1 doxycycline pill and you'll be cured. You won't get sick. You have a bullseye rash. You have Lyme disease. 1 pill of doxy is not going to cure you of Lyme disease. And I know people listening to this are going to think, well, there's a study out there that suggests 1 doxy right after a tick bite will prevent Lyme from being transmitted and disseminated in the human body. But that study has been disproved over and over and over again to be not accurate. And beyond that, it may suppress early symptoms, but it's not getting rid of the infection. So it's actually making things worse for you, right? So in that case, I feel like you're in my example and in your example, it's further solidifying the belief that it's not Lyme, or if it were, you'd be better, but yet it was just almost making it worse for you, right? I mean, what do you think about that looking back now at that 2 weeks of antibiotics that you took?
Yeah, well, first I just want to say, I think like 2 years ago, my brother texted me freaking out, and he said, I just found a tick in my foot. Like, what do I do? And I said, well, remove it. And I can't remember exactly what I said after that, but at some point I said, like, go to the hospital or go to the doctor, go somewhere and see what they can do for you. And he went and they gave him 2 doxy pills, 1 in the morning, 1 at night. You'll be fine. And he said that he could not believe how it was dismissed. And I couldn't either. It was just, yeah, that shocked me because that was the first time I had heard of them doing that. But yeah, but looking back on me taking 2 weeks of antibiotics, I understand that that really didn't prove anything. It didn't prove that I wasn't sick or that it wasn't Lyme disease, because it wasn't long enough, and especially because I had probably had it for a while at that point. So like it wasn't like I had just gotten bit like the day before. So
For
yeah.
sure. I mean, so walk us through though how you went from going to all these doctors from the time you were 12 to now almost 16. You finally had a decent neurologist who referred you to Boston Children's Hospital, I believe you said, where you got diagnosed with seizures. You kind of sat with that for a little bit. But then it sounds like your mom, I think you said, right, referred you out to a naturopathic doctor who ran the Western blot and you tested positive. Is that correct? Did I miss anything there? Okay. So did your mom turn to a naturopath because she was so desperate and you were getting worse, or was she, did she have a tendency to non-traditional medicine? Because it's hard to make a jump from, traditional doctors to a naturopathic doctor,
Yeah. Well, my mom has always been into naturopathic, homeopathic remedies, stuff like that. And my mom's a hairdresser, and she did the hair of this naturopath, and I knew the naturopath. I had seen her before for other things, and my mom knew that she was like literate in Lyme, and she knew what she was doing when it came to that. So and she knew that I guess she talked to her and found out she would give me a different test than Penn Bay did, which is the local hospital.
What did they do the ELISA? Is that what they did when they ran the test and it was negative earlier on?
I'm not sure. It was an antibody test, but
okay.
Yeah.
So just to kind of zoom out and time frame this, right? You were sick for at least 4 years from the time you were 12 to 16, because 12 was the Taylor Swift concert. You're 16. This is 5 years ago now. You're 21 today. You finally get a diagnosis from the naturopath. You have evidence. You have proof. You have Lyme disease. Do you bring it back and throw it in the faces of all of your Western doctors, or do you say, screw that, I'm just going to stick with this and stick with the naturopath? Where do you go from there?
Well, I'm not sure when it happened, but sometime in that period of time, I left my family doctor and found a new primary care. And he didn't exactly know what was going on either, but he believed that something was wrong with me. And so I finally had a primary care who would actually look into this stuff for me. And I'm not sure what happened with Lyme when I was a patient of his. I'm not sure if I went to him. I honestly can't remember. But yeah.
So Grace, I have to ask at this point now with the naturopath, because Hashimoto's and autoimmune disease are very, very, very common with tick-borne illness and chronic Lyme disease. And there's a lot of theories, right? We've discussed this with a lot of leading doctors and experts in the field. Some believe that, autoimmune predispositions genetically can cause, make you more likely to develop chronic Lyme, which is maybe a factor why some people can get Lyme and recover more quickly than others. Some people believe that the tick-borne illness can actually, be a trigger for the autoimmune itself. But like, what were you thinking, or what were your doctors thinking? Did they even see or think of a connection between the two when you first got diagnosed at 16?
So when I got diagnosed, no one really thought of any connection. I don't think anybody put it together. I kind of did myself in my head, like, well, this actually makes sense that like the tick bite was the start of it all. But actually, when I was a baby, I had health issues too. And I had constant infections in my kidneys because the flaps in my kidneys were underdeveloped. And they couldn't figure out what was going on. And then they'd treat me with antibiotics, but then I'd get thrush. So they'd have to stop the antibiotics to treat that. And it was just this back and forth. And at some point, an infection went too far and I became septic. And that, I think, damaged me really early on. Like I can barely see out of my left eye. And I've always had some muscle weakness and stuff like that. And I think that was a big part of that. And when I was young, I'd just like randomly fall down. And I think it was probably that, like muscle weakness. And I also found out later on that I have small fiber neuropathy, and I think that started at that point too. And then when I was 12, I got bit by the tick, and I think that kind of overloaded my system. And I think it probably, I don't know if it caused Hashimoto's or it brought out Hashimoto's, but I think it played a part in it. And also my migraines too, which is the main thing I deal with now. I was already like genetically set up to have migraines. Like my great grandma had them, my grandma had them, my mom had them, my brother had them. So I came from a family with really bad migraines. And then I got Lyme disease, and my migraines just started getting worse and worse. And they continue to get worse somehow, even today.
I think you just described that so well. I know you just described that so well, of how you had all these other things going on with your health. And then when you got Lyme, it just really was the straw that broke the camel's back, right, with your health. And that's kind of what you just described for us. But I do want to bring in Carly here as well, because one of my worst symptoms was migraines. I had an entire summer where I had debilitating migraines, and after work, if I could even go to work, I would just be in a dark room and I could barely function. And I know Carly has provided some brilliant tips on how to respond to migraines that we've actually reshared on social media and that we've used personally. So if we can just pause for a second, I'd like to see what Carly's views are on the migraine topic, because that's extremely common with Lyme. And if you guys can talk about what tips or tricks you can recommend to people listening that suffer with migraines, because I have to say probably 95% of people with chronic Lyme have dealt with headaches or migraines in some form or fashion.
Yeah, headaches was one of my worst symptoms. It comes back a little bit now, but not like it was when I was at my sickest, and it was every day. And mine were like a squeezing feeling. It felt like someone was trying to squeeze my brain. And then it would get worse and worse, or it turned into a migraine where everything hurt. So that was one of the things I focused on the most when I was healing, and then something that I would share out. And a lot of it feels like it's tension. And I would always almost feel like spirochetes, the bacteria, were like at the base of my head, almost just causing havoc and making everything really tight and squeezing. And which also led to a lot of jaw pain too, because all of that is connected. I would try to release a lot of tension in the bottom of my neck, or the top of my neck, but the bottom of my skull. That helped a ton. And just like using a lot of relaxation techniques, that helped me a lot, on like essential oils, and homeopathics. When you mentioned that, my mom was also super into natural homeopathics, and we turned to that really quick when no doctor could figure it out. So I relate to that a ton. But there's a lot of homeopathics that also help to like refuel your cells, because your cells get so dehydrated when you're trying to heal. The bacteria really sucks everything out of you. Your body's in overdrive. So just getting stuff that helps get hydration back on the cellular level. There's little homeopathics there. I have, in my reel, I think I talk specifically about what those are. And then doing like acupressure. So there's even just like massaging it with your fingers, or acupressure mats help a ton with those, with headaches. And then trying to get like blood flow as much as you can. But headaches has to be one of the most debilitating things, because it's just in your eyes and you can't focus. And that's something that is very noticeable when it gets better. But in the moment, it's really just giving yourself grace to rest, relax, and try to like relieve that pressure. So I don't know if you tried any of those things, or anything else that helped headaches.
Yeah, I haven't really found anything that is like, it makes a significant difference, especially when it gets to a really debilitating point. Like I have symptoms with my migraine that I didn't know were possible. Like my body goes numb. I have this like feeling that I can never really describe, like no words I say really like do it justice, I don't think. But I get really dizzy, like major vertigo, actually. It's more than dizziness. And like everything's spinning whenever I try to move. I feel like I'm being pushed back down, and I get like head rushes. Like I feel like I'm falling off a cliff over and over again. And at that point, all I can really do is just go to sleep, or it just gets worse and I start throwing up and all that. But I also have like visual disturbances and major headaches. I've gotten the like squeezing headaches, but I've also gotten headaches that are like really sharp pains, which actually I call Lyme headaches because I only seem to get them when I'm struggling with Lyme specifically. Like when that's really bad, that's when I get that type of headache. And yeah, so I haven't found anything that has like really worked. I'm currently on 2 prescription migraine medications and I take Tylenol and nothing really seems to help. But I was just referred to a headache clinic at Mass General. So I'm really hoping that they have some ideas.
Well, we definitely wish you luck with that. And just to share some things that have helped me, right? Because I was on so much prescription migraine medication as well. I mean, and that one summer, I can tell you, my neurologist tried everything under the sun, and I was on combinations, different things, and it was just nothing was working. But for me, I think a big part of it, to Carly's point, was when I started to really heal, and not just heal from Lyme, but whole body healing, because it's always more than just Lyme disease, right? When I started to heal my body, I noticed that my migraines were getting less, less significant, less powerful, and they were becoming less and less frequent. But some of the tools I love the most are peppermint oil. I whether it's doTERRA, Young Living. I'm not to me whatever works, right? But peppermint oil on my temples, the base of my skull, that really helped significantly for me. And the ice packs, I would use cervical ice packs, which were really powerful for me also to just take the pain away. And in addition to that, CBD oil. For me, that was like right when I started to get better. I would take CBD oil in high quantities. I mean, I would take probably about 25 milligrams, at a time. And within a few days, I noticed a significant improvement in my migraines. And I still take CBD oil. I try to take it every day, but honestly, a couple times a week, just almost preventatively, for maintenance now. And that's been very helpful as well. So I just wanted to share that with you, Grace, and everybody else that's listening to this podcast, because there are a lot of tools available. Some of them will work for me, they won't, and they'll work for you, and they won't work. So I just think there's a lot of things out there that we should all be aware of. And when you do, if go follow through, if there are things, you can definitely do a follow-up on this, Grace, and you can let us know. And what we can do for our listeners is update the show notes. So if somebody's listening to this and this is down the road, and if a few months after the launch, check those show notes and we'll be sure to update you with anything that we get from Grace down the road as well, if you're willing to share, Grace, as you make more progress in that area. So, all right. So now let's come back to, your diagnosis, right? So you're finally diagnosed, you're 16, it's 5 years ago. Are you still homeschooling? Are you able to actually, get through all of your homeschooling, or are you totally just now home and debilitated?
Well, earlier, like I think the year before that I was diagnosed with Lyme, through my 7th grade year and my 8th grade year, I was pulled out of school, given a tutor, put back in school part-time, and then put back in full-time like multiple times. They were pulling me out and then like soon after putting me back in, like trying to get me back into school, but each time it would fail. And then I started high school, and I was going to go to school half days, and that wasn't even working for me. I was too sick, and I had the school for some reason had this like electric scooter that they just had, so they let me use it, and so I didn't have to walk around a lot, and it still was not enough. I was in school in September, and I went to school a total of 3 days, and none of them were even next to each other. And I had to miss my first official day of high school because I was having inner ear tests done, which didn't show anything. But after that, they pulled me out of school and got me actually the same tutor I had the year before, so I already knew her. And I had a friend actually who was going through something as well, and so she was in tutoring with me, so it wasn't like I was finally around someone that was like my age. And right before Christmas break, we had this meeting. It was me, my parents, my teachers, and the school nurse, and they had this meeting about like where to go with me. And there was this moment. It was when we were leaving. They said that they wanted me back in school after Christmas break, and I was totally panicking. Like, I can't do that. And I mean, it's hard to deal with this anyway, but to deal with all this when transitioning to a new school is even harder. And it was just, I knew that I wasn't ready, and I didn't know if I ever would be. And I was feeling like really nervous about that, which didn't help at all. But the school nurse, as we were leaving, she pulled me aside and she said, you know, even if you're feeling sick, come to school anyway. And that to me was like kind of when I knew that they didn't understand, and they could never fully understand without going through it. And even if they did go through it, their experience might be different to mine. But that was the moment that was like, okay, I need to take more control of this. And actually I was listening to a song one night. Me and my dad were driving home, and there's this band I really like called Automatic Love Letter, and they have a song called Circles. And in it, the lyrics say, you can't run in circles at everyone else's request. And that really like hit me when I first heard it, and I kept replaying that song and listening to it. And then I was like, okay, I know that I'm only 15, but I have to change something. Like, I'm only 15, but this is still my life, and it's my education, it's my future, it's my health, and I should be the priority here. So I talked to my mom, and I said, like, I really want to go to an online school. And I looked up different schools, and I found one almost instantly that I really liked. And she told me to talk to Martha, who is a friend of hers, very smart. And actually, when I was really sick, 15, 16, I spent a lot of time at Martha's because she had Lyme also, and she understood it, and she had been really sick. And she was actually the first person I called when I got my diagnosis. But my mom said, go talk to her and see what she thinks. And I think my mom thought like she would say no, but I went to see her the next day, and we called the school and got all the information. And she said that she would help me enroll if my parents said it was okay. And I talked to my dad that night, and he said it was. And my mom, she said it was, but she wasn't feeling well that night. So I think she just said that to like get off the phone, because then she seemed a little upset about it. I think she was worried because she had heard that like when kids go online, they have no one like supervising them, and so they just don't do the work and they don't get it done. But I ended up switching to online school, and I was able to do it all on my own. So.
Wow. I really love I think you said it was, you can't run in circles at everybody's request, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, everybody else's request. Yeah.
At everybody else's request. I'm actually writing that down because I just think that's so powerful, because so many of us with Lyme have been through there, right? Where you're running in circles, everybody's telling you what to do. It's the whole, have you tried this? Have you tried that? You should do this, you should do that. The judgmental piece, doctors not believing you. And when you have that epiphany of, I'm not going to run in circles at everybody else's request, that's when you start to listen to your body and make the changes that are going to help you get better. And it sounds like at this point, everything came together. You got your diagnosis at 16. You had this epiphany from the song, thank God. You decided to take control and get online schooling so you can focus on your health. And now I'm excited to hear what comes next, because you finally have a diagnosis and you started to treat. So tell us, Grace, what was your treatment plan with this naturopath once you got your diagnosis?
So she had me on multiple antibiotics, I think. Honestly, this period of treatment isn't as clear in my mind as other periods. But I remember I was definitely on Doxy. And I think she had me on a few other things as well. And she had me on like different vitamins. Like, she said I had the second lowest vitamin D she's ever seen. So I was on that vitamin B complex, stuff like that. And I think when you get better gradually, it's kind of hard to notice. but I definitely think that some Lyme symptoms went away, but I continued to get sick. And I was dealing with like some lightheadedness and still with the sweating and some headaches and just having a really hard time like moving around. And at the end of 2019, I got a diagnosis of POTS, which explained so much. They had me do a tilt table test, and in 2 minutes, my heart rate went from 89 to 140 just from standing up. So that was what came next, and my doctor said she couldn't formally diagnose it. I guess because in Maine they're not really allowed to do that. And then she just told me like they'd get me into a pot specialist, and until then eat lots of salt, drink lots of fluids, drink lots of Gatorade. And she put me on a blood pressure medication, which really just made things worse. Every blood pressure medication I've tried has made things worse, but eventually they put me on a atenolol, and that helped my symptoms a lot. Like, it didn't cure them or anything, but it did help them a lot. But after that, in 2020, I think it was like June, I started feeling really sick, and I was getting fevers, and like all my joints hurt so bad. I couldn't even lay on my bed without a heating pad. I could barely move. Everything just hurt so bad. And I was on the phone with my mom one day, and I said, like, I haven't felt this way since I had Lyme. And that just kind of like a light bulb went off in my head, I guess. And I was like, I have Lyme again. That's what it is.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt real quick. So the time frame was you were 16, and how in 2020 is about 2 years ago. So you were like 19. So this is 3 years, about 16 to 19. Okay.
I was 19 at that time.
So when you were 16 and you treated with the naturopath, and you had the doxycycline, the antibiotic cocktail, and then all the vitamins, and then you got diagnosed with POTS, and you found that one treatment that actually, can you say that name again? I'm sorry, the name of the one thing that helped you with the POTS?
Atenolol.
Atenolol. Okay. So
Sure.
it sounds like you actually felt better. So did you feel like you kind of got your life back between then and the time you hit 19 when you started to feel sick again? Or was it just sort of, it got better and plateaued and you just kind of accepted that as your life at that point?
Yeah, well, it didn't make so much of a difference that like everything seemed to go back to normal. It helped my heart rate a lot. Like, I no longer felt like my heart was going to explode just from walking upstairs. But then I started like I continued to feel like a little off balance, and some muscle weakness and stuff like that.
How long were you on the antibiotics for when you first started them when you were 16?
I want to say a month.
And then did you stay on the vitamins and all the other stuff? Was there some sort of like maintenance regimen you were on at that point?
Yeah, I think over time, I kind of stopped taking it altogether because I did have like other medications I was taking, and it kind of seemed like I didn't need it as much, and it was kind of pushed to the back burner. But yeah, I continue to go through periods where I'm not on it, and then go back to it and continue taking like vitamin D and vitamin B and stuff like that.
So you were on and off what I'll call the maintenance regimen for, vitamins and things like that, but you were off the antibiotics and you thought you had the Lyme somewhat under control. Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, Grace, what medications were you taking besides that? Because you said you were taking other medications, and what were you taking them for?
Yeah, well, the one that I will always remember because I'm still on it is levothyroxine for my thyroid. And over time, I had been on so many medications, just different things they were trying. So, I mean, at one time I was on Topamax for migraines, and all that did was put me in a 24-hour migraine. Couldn't even get out of bed. Such bad vertigo. I couldn't even sit up. Like, I missed like a week of my life just completely from being on that medication. And there were multiple other things that I was on and off of. Like, I was on meclizine for a while, For dizziness, it didn't really help, but it could like take the edge off, I guess, if I remember that correctly, because it's been a while since I've been on it. But yeah.
So you were feeling better. You were taking things on and off to address the symptoms, but you still weren't symptom free. You were still trying to manage various symptoms tied to Lyme disease and other things probably going on in your body. But when you hit 19, I think around 2020, you said is when you really crashed again, right? So you had that second crash. Talk to us
Yeah.
about the crash, what symptoms came back, how bad they were, and then what you did then.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if it hit me all at once or it came on gradually, but I just remember one day it like hit me that, okay, something is wrong. I'm dizzier than I normally am. Like at that point, dizziness wasn't really a thing for me. It was more lightheadedness and just kind of like being off balance, but I wasn't really dizzy. And that came back, and I was feeling sick to my stomach, which is very rare for me. The only times that I ever feel sick to my stomach are like when I have the flu or something, when I have some type of virus. But other than that, like the only times I throw up are when I'm so dizzy that I throw up. Besides that, I don't really deal with that. So that was new. And I was I had such bad joint pain. My hips hurt so badly. And what else? I was having fevers again, which I hadn't dealt with in a while. So that was kind of like something that stood out above other things.
So at this point, when you started to realize that things were getting worse, you're 19 years old, and it sounds like this is the beginning of COVID as well, right? So it's a scary time in the world. You're developing these symptoms. What do you decide to do? Did you go back to your naturopath, or do you decide to go look for another doctor to help you?
Well, it took me a while to get there, but I did end up going back to the naturopath. What I originally did was when I said to my mom, like, I haven't felt this way since I had Lyme, it kind of clicked in my head at that moment. And I was like, oh my God, that's probably what this is. And I went to my newest primary care doctor, who I had just started seeing like that year, right before COVID hit. I called the office, and the first thing they did was get me scheduled for a COVID test. And so I got tested for COVID, and it was negative, of course. And then I was feeling like even worse, dizzier than I had been, and more nauseous and in more pain. And so I called my doctor, and they told me to go to the ER. And I thought, like, normally I avoid the ER, but I thought, like, if they're telling me to in a case like this, like, well, maybe they can help. And I went, and I got really sick while I was there. I was so weak, I couldn't even open my eyes, couldn't lift my arms because I was so off balance, and I felt like I was going to fall over. I was throwing up, and I could barely even communicate with them, and they were talking about releasing me. And I asked them, though, when I was there, like, will you test me for Lyme disease? And I knew it was probably going to be negative, but I thought, like, well, might as well, because they were going to take some blood for some other stuff too, I think. So they said, I noticed how quickly they said sure. And I wonder now if like that had to do with the fact that this time I was over 18, so they didn't see me as a child anymore. But yeah, it was negative. And I went home, and I continued to get sick, and I called my doctor again, and I said, like, I really think I have Lyme disease. I haven't felt this way since I had it. And she said, okay, well, I'll test you one more time. And she sent me to the hospital, and they tested me again, and it was negative. And then it was like, okay, you don't have Lyme, you're fine. I'm not going to see you again. I'm not going to talk to you again. And that was it for that. So I thought back to when I had Lyme before. And of course, now going through it, I know more now than I did when I was 12 years old. And so I tried to like think, what did I do then that made a difference? And I remembered, like, it was the naturopath who diagnosed me. So I went and I called and made an appointment with her, and I went to see her, and I wasn't even in her office yet. It was July at this point, so it was hot and I was wearing shorts and I was standing in the doorway of her office. She was walking behind me and she said, "How long have you had that rash on the back of your legs?" And I answered like a month, but I think I had had it longer than that. I had seen it before, but I wasn't really sure how long I had had it. And she said, "That's the Bartonella rash." And she explained to me why they weren't stretch marks. And just with that, she knew what was wrong and she tested me for Lyme. And actually I did test negative for Bartonella, but she said, like, "You have the rash. I'm sure you have it." And she tested me for Lyme and that was positive.
So she tested you for Lyme and Lyme was negative. I'm sorry, Lyme was positive and Bartonella was negative.
Yes.
So obviously you had Lyme again, whether you were reinfected or it was just active again because it was, possibly dormant or just sort of, sitting below the surface, right? But the Bartonella is Bartonella and Lyme together could obviously wreak more havoc. So when you realized you had Bartonella too, I'm curious, like, did you even know what Bartonella was? Because before I got diagnosed with Lyme, if you said to me Bartonella, like, what the frick is Bartonella, right? It's like, what was your thought when you heard Bartonella?
I had no idea what it was, but the way it sounded, it just sounded like it would correspond with Lyme disease in some way. Just, yeah, the way it sounds, in my mind, it was like, okay, it's like a co-infection or something. And she explained it to me, but before then I had never heard of it.
So now at this point, you're really, really bad, probably the worst you've been, it sounds like. And you go back to your naturopath, you have a positive Lyme test, and you have a clinical Bartonella diagnosis from the clear visible rash. What are you doing now to now start to climb back from this decline you had?
Yeah. Well, we tried to go back to my primary care doctor and have her look at the rash, because then my insurance would cover the treatment and all of that, but she refused to even see me.
This is your new primary care doctor, right? The one that you just...
Yeah. And so that got nowhere. And so it was like, okay, I'm gonna get treated. And so she did start treating me and I was on doxy, rifampin, and other ones that I cannot pronounce the names of. I think I was on a total of like 5 antibiotics. And actually one thing she gave me was to like you mentioned earlier, like Lyme disease kind of builds a barrier around itself. And one thing she gave me was specifically to break that apart.
So more like a biofilm buster, probably, right?
Yeah.
Do you recall what that was? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
I don't know.
There's so many things out there, so many things that we take in our journey. It's hard to remember them all. So when you're taking these 5 antibiotics and the biofilm buster, I mean, that's a lot to take at once. Did you herx? Did you feel worse? Walk us through what happened when you first started treating with all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, because of like the Bartonella, the treatment was longer this time. I can't remember exactly how long, but I was being treated for like a few months, because it was probably going to be more aggressive, and it was, and it took a while, but I did get sick on it. I remember feeling very sick to my stomach. Like I had to make sure that I had a meal, like a full meal with every dose, or else I would throw up. And yeah, it was pretty harsh on my stomach, especially. And I think the joint pain got worse before it got better. And I was still having fevers, but eventually the Lyme specific symptoms started to go away. I was still left with like what my POTS and migraines caused, but I think at that point the Lyme symptoms had started to kind of disappear a bit, and I was feeling better, like no excruciating joint pain or things like that.
So now at this point, you're 19, closing in on 20, you're 21 today. Walk us through the rest of that time gap there, from the time you started your treatment through where you are today. Did your health continue to improve? When you went off the antibiotics, did you do anything to maintain your health? Any tips or tricks you can give our listeners to combat any sort of declines you may have or stressful periods in your life? Just anything you can share with us about that time period.
Yeah. Well, actually, after getting treated for this in 2020, feeling better in that way, I started getting the symptoms again at the end of 2021. And I went back to my doctor and she tested me for Lyme, and it was a Western blot test and it was not quite positive. But she had also given me a questionnaire to fill out. And it's like, if you score like a 52 or higher, then you likely have Lyme disease. And I scored a 73 or something like that. And I mean, I'm from the coast of Maine, so it's not uncommon. And then yeah, I had the symptoms that I had previous to it. And I had also at the end of 2020 got another Western blot test, and there was only like one bar on it, so it was clear that the treatment had worked. But this time in the Western blot test there were 4, so even though it wasn't quite positive, it really seemed like it was back. So
When you say it was back, Grace, do you think that it just was never really gone but being managed, but it came back to make you sick again? Or do you think you were constantly being bit and reinfected and you didn't even know it by ticks where you live?
Yeah, well, the first time, I think the first treatment kind of wiped it out, and then I got bit again, and that's when
So
I got sick.
you think at 19 you got bit again, right? When that happened again with the Bartonella, is that what you're saying? Okay,
Yeah.
but then from 19 to 20, you think what?
I think at that point, I think it just came back. I don't know that for sure. Like but I know in 2020 there was something, I don't know what it was. There was something about my test that made my doctor say like, this is a new infection. So, and plus I had never been diagnosed with Bartonella before, and there was nothing indicating Bartonella previous to it. But yeah, with in 2021, I got diagnosed the beginning of this year for the 3rd time. That infection, I think it just came back. I don't think I was bit again, but I don't know, I might be wrong about that.
So just this year, when you're 21, you get a little sick again, and you test positive again, or this is where the bands were just below the positive mark?
Yeah, just below the positive mark.
But clinically, and obviously, that you had Lyme again with your doctor, right? So that's this year. Walk us through. I mean, this is like a merry-go-round, right? Like you're getting Lyme. It took you 6 years in the beginning to 6 whatever. Well, I think it was about 4 years. I'm sorry, 4 years in the beginning, 12 to 16 to get diagnosed. But then you had a reinfection. It sounds like from 16 to 19, and then 19 to 21, it comes back. So are you doing anything differently? Because identifying that, it sounds like maybe you weren't reinfected again, but it just kind of came back, but with more of a punch. How did you change it up to treat it this most recent time when you were 21, just this past year?
This most recent time, I think same antibiotics. And I think I know the second time I was infected, it was longer treatment and more antibiotics than the first time. And this time, I think it was the same antibiotics. I don't think the treatment was as long, but I think I also took more vitamins and stuff like that. And they had found out that I was anemic. So I was on iron and stuff like that, which I think was, I think my doctor thought it could be related to the Lyme. So I was on a lot of stuff like that. Other than that, not too much was switched up this time.
But it sounds like you were finding other things going on, and as you were balancing out your various things in your body, right, iron, etc., you were building this better body to be able to defend itself, right? And that's what it comes down to a lot of these times. So you're getting a better feel of what's going on in your body. You're addressing those things and giving your body a fighting chance to fight back against Lyme and allow your immune system to do what it was designed to do, keep you healthy, right? So that's kind of what you were focusing on each step of the way. And every time you had a relapse or a setback, you would hone in even more, fine-tune things, hit it hard with your aggressive treatment again, and then reassess, right? That sounds like what I'm hearing from you. Is that a good assessment, do you think, of what happened throughout your various up and downs?
Yeah.
So I do want, Carly's going to jump in shortly. So I just want to highlight that, you know, the way we found you is your Lyme advocacy page. And you also, we know you have a TikTok, In the Limelight, on TikTok. We know that you have a personal Instagram that, hey, it's Grace13. And you have your Lyme Instagram, the My Lyme Life 13. And you've done a lot throughout your illness to help advocate and help others, right? So you're advocating for Lyme awareness, but you're also helping others with their experience, and you're giving back while you're sick, which is really powerful. So just give us an idea of when you first started getting into the advocacy world and why you decided to start helping other people, even though you were still so sick. And Carly's going to talk to you about, you know, what you're doing today with your health, and also how you kind of had this transformation to give back and help people in the Lyme community.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't really know when I decided that I wanted to advocate for Lyme awareness and stuff like that. It felt like it kind of came naturally, because I just think about like all the stuff I went through, and I really wish that I had some of the information that I have today. And you know, I think about how I really was not taken seriously, and so I wanted to do something that would possibly help someone. Like, I knew there was no guarantee that I would help anyone, but I figured it was better to at least try. And something that really hit me was I was watching some virtual event from the Global Lyme Alliance, and they had all these kids talking about being sick with Lyme disease. And that really struck me because I was just a kid when all of this started. And like, I remember how like terrifying that was. And I just wanted to do something that could potentially help someone feel better about it. And actually in the future, what I want to do with that is like I mentioned, I want to write novels eventually, and I really want to write a book with a main character who has Lyme disease, because I realized that there really aren't any that are fictional. So I want to create a character that goes through that, probably someone really young, like a teenager, something like that. Yeah.
That's amazing. That Lyme is not represented in any kind of story like that. So that is such a brilliant idea. And I love that it's something that you've loved for so long and that was your passion, and you can take this lesson and now integrate it and then use what you've been through and combine it with your passion. That's amazing. Kind of on that subject, what kind of describe other parts of this Lyme journey and what it's taught you about yourself? And just, I guess, yourself in the world and just going through a lot of the suffering. I know you still are in a way. So what has it taught you just about everything?
It's taught me a lot about, I guess, empathy for people who go through things like this. It's taught me that I know my body best. And although I may not always understand what's going on with my body, like I know when something's wrong. And like, I know my body better than all these doctors who told me that nothing was wrong just because my labs were normal. Or I have a family history of anxiety, so that only played into it. So those are the two main things. It also taught me a lot about mental health and what it can really do to someone, because there was this one point where I was dealing with a lot of mental health issues. I had depression, anxiety. The only mental health problem that I actually have that has not been caused by anything, as far as I know, is I have OCD. But I was depressed and had generalized anxiety, and I think it was caused by Lyme, or it might have not been caused by the disease, but what the disease did to my life, like, because I was not really around people very much and stuff like that. So that, I think, played a part in it. But they tried to put me on all these medications. One made it better until it stopped working, and then everything else was just horrible. And so it taught me a lot about what this can do to someone, and that like it's not easily fixable by medication, and medication with mental health is really not one size fits all. So that was something that I learned with this.
Yeah, that is an amazing point. And yeah, there's the journey of Lyme can really affect mental health as well, and they really go together. What advice would you give others who are in the thick of healing Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses? You've been through so many ups and downs and back and forths, and it just shows a lot of your strength. What advice would you give someone going through it?
I'm really not sure. Like, I don't have any specific advice about treatment or anything like that. But like, to my point that I just made, like, you know your body best. Don't let anybody try to take that from you, because chances are they don't know what they're talking about, because they're not in your body. You're the only one that is. So you're the one going through this, and if you think something is wrong, it probably is.
I love that piece of advice. That is so powerful, because I think a lot of times patients or anyone who's sick, they don't know what to do, and they put so much of the knowledge and taking so much of whatever doctors say that they forget you're the one who knows best. I drive that home so many times. Like, who knows your body best? It's you. So I think your story is so powerful that you just knew, and having that knowing, and even if it's not something data on a piece of paper from a test, and you're just like, oh, well, I have this feeling, that is so powerful. Sometimes that is beyond some test that comes back negative most of the time, and false negative. So I think that piece of your story is going to be so powerful for people to hear, because they may have that feeling as well, and maybe they don't trust it because they're not a doctor and the doctor told them. And I love that. That is so, so powerful. And I think everyone who is in the Lyme world would probably agree with that once they've kind of discovered that they are the ones who are their own advocate. So I love that. So powerful. All right. So final two questions. So one, if a loved one came to you with a tick biting them on their leg, what would you recommend they do so they're not suffering? We've probably learned a lot. You probably learned a lot in your journey, but what would be like your first thing of advice? It doesn't have to be anything like super scientific or anything like that. Just kind of, what would you tell them? Like your brother did, like when he came to you, but now.
Well, the first thing I told him, because that was the first time that it happened, someone had come to me and been like, there's a tick biting me, what do I do? But my first piece of advice is usually just like remove the tick and put it in like I think like vinegar or something. I can't remember now. My mom always did that to kill it and keep it away from, and make sure it doesn't get back to you or anybody else or any pets or anything like that.
Yeah, you definitely don't want, especially, oh my gosh, you don't want another bite. And this is my, so that's the question they usually will end their shows on. And my question, kind of going on with your book, and this may not be your book title, but what is one word, or it could be like 2 words-ish, that you would describe your whole Lyme journey with? It could be your maybe potential book title.
Funny, because I've thought about naming my book this. I actually have 2 names that I'm trying to decide between. And this might not make too much sense, but it does to me in my body, is numb.
No, totally. That makes so much sense. And when you said a lot of your feelings was like you tingling and having that feeling, and just that feeling pushing you to keep wanting to not feel numb, like having that extreme feeling just keeps wanting you to find answers. So I totally understand that. But this has been amazing. I've absolutely loved your story. I can relate to it so much, and your strength is absolutely astounding, that you've been on a roller coaster, literally back and forth, and still trying to find answers and push through, and that you're here sharing your story. So many people will be helped by this. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
And I just have to say, Grace, thank you so much for joining this podcast. I want everybody to know who's listening that we literally called you 2 minutes before this podcast started because we had an opening. And Carly and I were like, let's just find somebody on our wait list. And we called you up, Grace, and you just killed it. So all the normal prep that goes into a podcast by the guest and by the interviewers, we just winged this. And this was a brilliant podcast. I just want to thank you, Grace, for being so brave to come on and do this. And I want to thank Carly for just being such an amazing co-host and being willing to do this without any kind of preparation. So both of you have been amazing. Thank you so much for what you brought to the community and always doing what you can to give back and help everybody in the Lyme community. So thank you both, Carly and Grace.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been great. Thank you for listening to our Tick Bootcamp interview with our guest, Grace Anderson. First, if you'd like to learn more about Grace, please check out her Instagram at HeyIt'sGrace13 or at MyLymeLife13. Second, if you've enjoyed this episode of the Tick Bootcamp podcast, please share it with your friends on social media. Third, Tick Bootcamp has created a tick bite blueprint that has been inspired by the information that has been shared with us by past podcast guests. We urge you to visit our website at tickbootcamp.com/bite to view the blueprint. Fourth, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify to get your automatic episode updates of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. Please take a minute to leave us an honest review on your podcast platform of choice. And finally, if you'd like to search our podcast library of over 300 episodes, subscribe to our email list, or share feedback, please visit our website at tickbootcamp.com. Thank you, as always, for listening.